There's something unique about fantasy that no other genre can replicate. Where else can you escape reality so completely? Where else do the rules of our world simply not apply? I fell in love with this genre as a child, and that love has never wavered. The idea that someone could sit down and build an entire universe from nothing, complete with its own history, magic, cultures, and conflicts, that's what drew me in. These weren't just stories, they were fully realized alternate realities. The books that defined my childhood weren't subtle about their ambition. Harry Potter gave us a hidden magical world existing alongside our own. Lord of the Rings presented Middle-earth with such depth that you could study its languages and history. Narnia offered doorways to other dimensions. Percy Jackson reimagined ancient mythology in the modern age. Each of these worlds felt alive, felt real, felt worth getting lost in for hours. The authors understood something fundamental. Fantasy works when you commit completely to the world you're creating. But here's what made these stories truly special. They didn't just build interesting settings. They populated them with characters worth caring about. Heroes who struggled, who failed, who had to grow into their roles. The adventures mattered because the stakes felt genuine. You wanted these characters to succeed. You feared for them when things went wrong. That emotional investment is what separates memorable fantasy from forgettable background noise. Seeing these stories adapted to screen should have been the natural evolution. And for one brief, perfect moment, it was. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy set a standard that still hasn't been matched over 2 decades later. These films understood what made the source material work. They respected Tolkien's vision while translating it into cinematic language. Even now, certain scenes hit just as hard as they did on first viewing. That's the power of adaptation done right. 25 years have passed since Fellowship of the Ring released, and the fantasy genre has been chasing that success ever since. Game of Thrones had its moments of brilliance, particularly in the early seasons, but nothing has come close to capturing that same magic. And honestly, I'm starting to think we might never see it again. Not because the source material doesn't exist. There are incredible fantasy novels waiting to be adapted, but because the people making these adaptations don't seem to understand what made the originals work. Look at what we've gotten recently. Major streaming services with massive budgets have attempted to crack the fantasy formula with shows like The Witcher, Rings of Power, and Wheel of Time. These aren't small experiments, they're flagship productions, with resources most filmmakers could only dream of. And yet all 3 have been complete disasters. Not just disappointing, actively bad. And here's what makes it worse. Each of these shows is based on exceptional source material. The books are brilliant, the worlds are rich, the stories are compelling. So what went wrong? The authors who created these worlds poured everything into them. Tolkien and Robert Jordan were both war veterans whose experiences shaped their writing. Andrzej Sapkowski crafted the Witcher stories with genuine Eastern European folklore at their core. These weren't just entertainment products churned out to meet market demand. They were labors of love, personal mythologies, stories that meant something to their creators. And instead of treating these works with the respect they deserve, modern adaptations have stripped them down, twisted them around, and rebuilt them into something completely unrecognizable. Let's talk about why fantasy works in the first place. A huge part of it is escapism. You pick up a fantasy book or start a fantasy show because you want to leave your world behind and enter somewhere completely different. That's the entire point. You want to see cultures that don't exist here, magic systems with their own internal logic, landscapes that defy physics. The moment a fantasy world starts feeling too much like our own reality, it stops working. The escapism vanishes. Modern fantasy shows have completely failed at this. Take a screenshot from Rings of Power and put it next to one from The Witcher. Can you tell which is which? Probably not. They all look identical. Same muted color palettes, same generic medieval aesthetic, same style of armor that looks like it came from a costume shop, same elves used in the exact same capacity. Even the characters speak with that same slow, deliberate, pseudo-profound tone, as if talking slowly automatically makes dialogue meaningful. It just makes everything feel pretentious. Compare that to what Jackson did with Middle-earth. Rohan looked nothing like Gondor. The architecture, the clothing, the military equipment, all distinct. Isengard's orcs were visually different from Mordor's orcs. The Shire felt like a completely different world from Bree. Each location had its own identity, its own culture, its own traditions. This made Middle-earth feel massive and alive. You believed different peoples lived in different places because you could see the differences. Now look at Wheel of Time and Rings of Power. The villages look interchangeable. Same tired old men, same diverse casting despite supposedly being isolated medieval communities, Same female leaders giving speeches while men stand around looking useless. I'm not saying diversity is the problem. I'm saying lazy world building is the problem. If everyone everywhere looks the same and acts the same, you haven't built a world. You've built a set. It's not just incompetence. At some point, you have to wonder if this is intentional. If the writers actually believe that creating distinct cultures with different values and traditions is somehow divisive, that showing men and women filling different roles in society is regressive. So instead, every society in every fantasy show now looks like a modern city council meeting. Every woman is a warrior or a leader. Every man is either evil or incompetent. Every village is ethnically diverse, despite geographic isolation. It's all so transparently ideological. The monsters suffer from the same problem. In great fantasy, creatures are distinctive. The Lord of the Rings trilogy gave us cave trolls, Balrogs, Nazgul, giant spiders, and each one unique and memorable. Modern shows give us generic CGI monsters that move the same way, look basically the same, and sound identical. There's no creativity, no imagination, no attempt to build something that feels new. It's all template-based production. Then there's the dialogue. Fantasy literature often features conversations that feel timeless. Characters discuss duty, sacrifice, courage, mortality, universal themes explored through carefully chosen words. The authors who wrote these stories had real experiences to draw from. Modern fantasy dialogue sounds like someone trying very hard to seem profound while saying absolutely nothing. Characters speak in convoluted metaphors that don't actually mean anything. Every line tries to be poetic and philosophical, but ends up sounding like pretentious nonsense. It's people who've never experienced hardship writing what they think wise people sound like. And it shows. Here's the core problem. The people making these shows don't understand the source material. And worse, they don't want to understand it. They're not interested in adapting these stories faithfully. They're interested in using these stories as vehicles for their own messages. The Witcher showrunners openly mocked the books. They drove out Henry Cavill, the one person actually fighting to keep the show authentic to its roots. Now they're focusing on side characters nobody asked for, while the main character vanishes from his own series. The Witcher's ratings collapsed after Cavill left. Rings of Power is hemorrhaging viewers despite Amazon's massive investment. The good news is that audiences are rejecting this. These shows are failing because viewers aren't stupid. They can tell when something is made with love versus when it's made with contempt for the source material. The bad news is that we're left with a massive gap in the fantasy market. House of the Dragon has shown that audiences still want high-quality fantasy content. The demand exists, but the supply of well-made, faithful adaptations is basically non-existent. Will we ever get another fantasy adaptation that matches the quality of Jackson's Lord of the Rings? I honestly don't know. The talent exists. The source material exists, but the industry seems more interested in pushing agendas than telling stories. Until that changes, until creators remember that their job is to serve the story, not themselves, we're stuck with mediocrity at best and disasters at worst. Fantasy deserves better than what it's getting. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on modern fantasy in the comments below.